Like I'd gone around my house.
And
Hey,
I'm back on the horn with Dr. J Nass. How you doing,
good
man?
morning. Good morning. It's great.
Good morning.
I just love that intro, man. Yeah, it's
Oh,
9:30,
thank you.
9:45. It's like you could be when that intro comes up, I think I'm watching the Sci-Fi Channel. And I feel like we're gonna get some science, we're gonna get some fiction, we're gonna get some fantasy, which is kind of true. I mean, a
Yeah,
lot of stuff
well,
we talk about, it's how we conceptualize things, and a lot of it's just here.
very appropriate for what we're going to talk about this morning is truth and lies and
Mm,
how we put together reality, how individually. And for me, so on Ramble Source, I've been talking to Mike Elias,
okay.
who is working on the epistemology of love. And so
Okay.
he talks about like forming or getting to truth through through relationships and desiring or like orienting willing to love somebody and then seeing truth through love. And we're still working it out. He's still working out, and I've been sort of working out too as we talk about it. But what were some of your thoughts? And you said something about the lies we believe.
Oh, so we tell ourselves lies all the time.
Mhm.
Um, I remember who was our who was our who was our philosophy professor?
Elkins,
Elkins,
Dr.
yeah.
Elkins,
I'm friends with him on
Barry
Facebook,
Elkins.
and I just forget. But he is where I actually first learned philosophy. Um,
Mm.
I've done other stuff since then, but yeah, he's one where I first learned philosophy, and he was talking about uh, when is it okay to lie.
Mm.
And he was like, because he was talking about lying, and he's like, well, what if you are a German citizen during World War II, and the SS comes to your door and they say, are you hiding any Jews here?
Yeah.
Can you lie about it? And
Well,
his
yeah.
stance was because they intended to do harm, they had lost their right to the truth. And
Mm.
so you weren't trying to harm the Nazis. You weren't trying to do something evil, but you knew they were. And so you're like, you don't have a right to know what I got in my house. So no, there ain't no Jews
Mm.
here. And that was a very interesting thought for me. And
Mhm.
that's a thought out lie. The things that we don't think out about is the Mandela effect, where I think
Mhm.
a loose definition is where large pieces of the population seem to misremember something or have some
Yeah.
experience that we can prove didn't actually happen. Like Sinbad, he's a comic from the late 80s, early 90s, light skinned black
Mhm.
guy, funny, wear the big Alibaba pants and stuff. And
Mhm.
apparently, I'm one of those people who think that there was a genie movie with him in it. Don't know where it come from, but there's a lot of us that believe
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, the more common one I think is the Berenstain Bears and how it was spelled and how people pronounce it. Like everybody
I
remembers it
don't.
the Berenstain Bears, but it's like the Berenstein Bears or something like that.
Well, because
And
I
then
was
there's
like,
also yeah.
single digits, and you weren't going to really explain German names to me, Stei, What I'm not thinking of that. I'm just looking at brother bear, sister bear, mama bear, papa bear, and their little story. I don't care.
Yeah.
Like for the longest time, I just called Charlie Brown Charlie Brown. I didn't realize it was Peanuts because Peanuts didn't make sense to me. I'd read
Mhm.
Peanuts every week at my grandma's house. I'd read the
Yeah.
comics. It would say Peanuts, and I would just call it Charlie Brown. I don't know. But my point is, I've kind of pointed out a sort of a bigger lie to protect yourself from Nazis, kind of a harmless lie where, oh, Sinbad, you know, was a genie. No, he wasn't. But I think we do this in other parts of our life, and we make decisions on these lines, and it's really strange because I don't feel like I had a whole lot of control over this belief about Sinbad. It was just there, and I didn't.
Well, I mean, well, that goes to the idea of what is truth, though. What do you? So it sounds to me through your tone and what you're saying that you believe in. And as a doctor, I would assume you believe in objective truth.
Well, that's what I'm talking. Something you can validate or invalidate. You can falsify or whatever, or satisfy. Have what Dr. Elkins would call. There's a difference between having certainty and certitude. I'm talking about certainty, not certitude. Certitude is just, I believe it, I can't prove it, but it just seems like all the information I have is saying this is so. That's certitude.
But even proving things, can we prove anything?
Well, Descartes confronted that a little bit. He tried to deny everything. He was like, nothing exists. I'm going to deny everything. Nothing. And after a long time of thinking about it and trying to push everything away, he's like, I think, therefore I am. Who's doing the denying? Who's doing all this thinking? It's me.
Right. So but I mean, that doesn't really help us with our engagement with proving what's going on around us, right? Like with
right. But
reality.
that was the first
proves that we exist.
That was the first step, that there is reality. Okay, there's someone thinking these thoughts, and that has been that we've built on that since Descartes, and we built on it before Descartes, and we just sort of, okay, now that Descartes says that, these things in the past do actually make sense, and we can validate them to some extent. I mean, if you're asking me the question, are we living in a big computer scenario or something, and none of this is real? I mean, I'm not prepared to talk about that. I did read an article the other day that said that it would be impossible because just the way that when it had something to do with randomness and probability and variability, and it said we would know if something was out of sorts, but I don't know. I don't buy it necessarily. It was some guy talking. I need to go Google that, look that up, but I'm not really going to go down that road because that's not something I know anything about. And if I talk about it, it would just mostly be lies anyway. Lies I made up that sound weird, right?
Well, it is, and you call them lies, but the thing is that a big revelation I had it was a couple of years ago now, was that our reality is based on memory. I mean, every single thing we experience, we think of it as like right now that we're in real time. But even this, there's like at least a split second between us, seeing it with, it happening and our brains processing it. And it was actually in a discussion I was having with my dad about seeing things that aren't there, so like hallucinations, and how that's even possible, and really like it makes sense how possible it really is. Oh, who's that? Hello.
My cat is wanting love.
I was just making sure it wasn't a hallucination on my yeah. So if like everything that comes, if our reality is completely made up of memories, then false memories are a huge
They're a problem. Right. So you need something that's very verifiable multiple times during multiple, periods of time, because you formulate thoughts when you're a child, and if you never revisited them, you'll be 50 years old and thinking the same thing, and you not even realize that you just have this false blah, blah, blah. In science, we do this all the time. We always compare one study to other studies. And a lot of times studies are being held globally and intentionally with really, really diverse perspectives, people living in a very different community, very different political structure, very different motivations, and people at different walks of life. They're not just people, we're not just getting data from government, we're getting it from colleges, individuals, foundations, whatever, at different points in time. And then we're comparing them and going, okay, we've seen over time that this is what we're consistently getting out of this study all over the globe with the extreme diversity of perspectives. There's no way that they're just making it up. Okay. It's just not likely.
There's never
and
no
if
way.
They are,
it's not likely, right?
If they are, it doesn't matter. It works. We've proven that it works. We've proven it works multiple times across the globe and multiple times through history. So even if it's false, it still works for us for whatever reason. We may not have elucidated that reason. We take Tylenol. We don't know how it works. No one knows how Tylenol works.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that we just take for granted. Yeah. And it's kind of scary how much, how much of our life we just take for granted.
Right.
Especially Americans. We just, this is the way it is. When really, it's not necessarily the way it is. There's really no truth behind it. It is just the way we've done it, or at least that's what we remember.
Memory. A person you want to talk to about this is Jordan Peterson. He's got an interesting thought on memory, and he asks the question, what is the purpose of memory? And what's funny is I was doing this too when we were talking about vaccinations and memory cells, both memory T cells and B cells. Screw the B cells. It's the T cells you want to think about. Anyways, that was my soapbox moment. But he says, what is the purpose of memory? It's to navigate the future. That's all it is. It's to navigate the future. It's not just to remember a phone number. It's because you're going to use it to call a person in the future. And that navigation also is about avoiding bad experiences or maybe reinforcing good experiences because you remember what happened. And that's the purpose of memory. And how I connected it with vaccines and disease was, if your body got a virus or pathogen and got over it, what would be the purpose of memory T and B cells? The purpose is so when you get infected again, because you will, then your body has a defense. But there was this whole thought process where, like, oh, if I get over it, I'll never get it again. I'm like, name one disease where that happens. I'll wait. Well, but it has to do with memory. It has to do with memory.
Right, memory, yeah. And memory fades. And
memory fades. Some memories fade. Some don't.
All memories fade. No, all memories fade. See, the thing is one of the
my
things
memories. I have some pretty sharp memories.
Well, maybe you
now
do.
I might get sick one day. I may fade. That's a different process, but it may affect my memory.
So the thing is we recently I watched the new Five Nights at Freddy's movie with my kids, and
I don't know
there was this premise. This guy was trying to go back and recreate his memories, and he was sold on this idea that his memories, there was a perfect memory and he could go back and find it. And
perfect memory.
But the problem is, and somebody brought this up, that's completely false, or at least we think it is, based on based on science.
Science. Yeah.
Well, not just social. I mean, science in general.
It's a psychological science, so it's called social science. That's just what it's called. But yeah, it's science.
but it's it's not just social science. I mean, when they look at firing neurons in your head, that's not social science, right?
No, that's not social science. But that assumes that we understand how neurons and memory work, and we don't. So yes,
well, I mean, like you said,
I skip
most of science. We don't know. We don't really know what's going on. It's just, I mean, what is science? It's not necessarily science, right? Isn't about figuring out how things work as much as it is just watching them work and documenting it, right? And then deducing ideas from that,
right?
Like you said, if it works, we don't really care how it works as long as it
She's
works.
so won't need you today. Sorry, I'm sorry.
But they brought up as proof of this, they brought up the idea that that's why we have a right to speedy trial, because the longer we wait, the more our memories are corrupted, and often we can remember something like the Mandela effect that never actually we remember it perverted, or not necessarily perverted, but sometimes perverted, but
Yeah. Well,
twisted.
memories do get perverted, or they get twisted, and they like you can
Mhm.
think like your memory may of someone who said something to you. Suddenly they have a scowl on their face. Suddenly they had a tone in their
Yeah.
voice. Whatever, you can alter these kinds of memories, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because I think that technology matters in this, because we can record
Mm.
things and keep them forever. But when our system was being set up, we didn't have any means to do any of that. We could write,
Mm.
printing press. That was it. There
Yeah.
were no telephones, no photographs, no videos, no.
Mm.
We didn't have the technology to preserve things. I'm going to say something that's kind of controversial. Actually, I don't think anyone's ever said it, but I realize it could be controversial. But I don't think that we would have had the internment camp problem with the Asian folks in World War II that we had if we had the technology now then, because you can track them. They all got a phone. We know where they're at. Right? We didn't have to all
Mhm.
put them all in a little camp and watch them. I think the
Yeah.
technology would have alleviated certain ways that we deal with memory and certain ways that we deal with disease and cultural phenomena like that. Right? So, but
Mm.
I think you're right that memory does fade. Speedy trial back then, they're like, if I have a trial years from now, I'm not going to remember what happened. So I'm agreeing with
Yeah.
you on that. I think you're absolutely right about that.
Well, but see, and then the difficulty is we start relying on technology, and then technology starts to corrupt and fade, right?
Well,
With fake deep fakes and fake we can pretty
so
much get into
far,
the place where we can.
we can determine the difference between fake and not fake so far.
It's
But
getting hard.
it's getting harder. But you and me you break into my house, I kill you or whatever. They're jerking my video out of the corner of my. I don't have the technology or the wherewithal to go, oh, I'm going to deep fake Judah breaking into my house. It's not. So you start understanding
But
that that may be relegated to a certain class of people or demographic of people.
but just in that case alone, imagine though, if it's not you, what if the people that jerked it out of your security system want to frame you?
Yeah, like I'm the
Do
accused.
you have do
Well,
you
I
have
mean,
the technology?
no
You
one
have the
wants to do that
technology
to
to
me.
really know.
No one of
Well,
any
you
no one of any power wants to do that to me. And if they wanted to, be my guest. Come on.
But you see the
I mean,
point, right? Like, as we there really is, as we create reality, there is nothing real solid that we can put our hope in.
I don't know what you mean by that. What kind of hope? I don't know what you mean
Like
by that.
every like every piece of fact that we have access to is corrupted. I think you were saying earlier, by our
Corrupted and
perception of it.
constructed and corrupted.
Yeah,
Oh, I mean,
constructed. Yeah.
they suspect that 90% of all our thoughts are unconscious or subconscious, like we're not even
Mm.
aware of them.
Mm.
So we make choices without even knowing we're making choices. And that's where this whole truth thing comes from, where you're like, I'm one of these
Mhm.
people where it's my job day in and day out to fact and double fact check. And then you start aiming that at yourself and it becomes a scary tool. You're like, I've been saying this kind of crap for
Mm.
years, and I'm just not right about that, or
Mm.
my wife told me the other day, she's like, you have no idea how you've really changed my classes. Now, my wife is an advanced science teacher, and she has all the advanced kids, and
Mhm.
I'm like, baby, you should probably double check me before you just start things I say and teaching them the children. I realize that I'm accurate much of the time, but I would feel better if you call me on it and make saying true things to people, not Jay Nass's. What was Adam Savage? I reject your reality and substitute with mine. The guy from Mythbusters, the red-beard guy, chunky glasses from Mythbusters. I substitute your reality, with mine.
Yeah. Well, and that to me, that's at the basis of what Ramble Source is. It's based off of this idea. One of my brothers-in-law, Joe Brooks, he had this analogy of truth and said that like he believed in objectional truth. It's just that there's darkness between us as humans and truth, and that everybody has a flashlight, of intellect. And it's not until we get together as people and your flashlight illuminates one spot, my flashlight illuminates the other, and the more of us there are, the more we can see of it.
Right. It's the three blind men feeling on an elephant, and one grabs the tail and says, "Oh, this has got to be like a cow or something," and one grabs a leg and says, "Oh, this is a different animal," and one grabs a trunk and names it, because they're only seeing the animal in part. But if they put all their knowledge together, like, oh, this adds up to an elephant. But the one guy only has the tail. He doesn't have the perspective of the others. And,
Yeah. And so that's why I appreciate
we see through a glass sparkly.
Yeah. Yes. Well, so what do we do? What do we do, Jay? How does that influence what we do today? How should that, what we're talking about, what we're coming up with, how should that affect our behavior today?
I think we should live as honestly as with ourselves as possible first, then with others.
What does that look like?
Well, like just calling yourself out on stuff that you think or do that's not based on anything. And sometimes it could be something simple as negative self-talk. God, Jay, that was so stupid. Well, maybe it wasn't. I'm just telling myself that I am, and I shouldn't do that. Right? It's being honest with yourself, all the little things you say or think, and you're like, wait a minute, does that have truth to it, or is it beneficial? I mean, Paul talks about, things being beneficial or constructive. Is it beneficial or constructive? And if it's not, if it's just there to put me down or to make me have some false belief about something, because once I get myself right, then maybe I can worry about other people's. And part of getting myself right is treating other people right. And I spent some time with my family, and I don't know what you know about it, but my family back home is not a very healthy picture, and they have a tendency to notice stuff and have to call it out and criticize it. Look at that shirt; it's a stupid shirt. That color, isn't that associated with that hippie movement? Like stuff like that. It's like, what does it matter to you? That's not helpful or constructive. And no, it was not associated with the hippie movement. So that's a lie. You have to figure that out in your own mind. Don't put that on me. It's just stuff like that. It's like, so when I come back, I was like, oh Lord, I'm genetically related to these people. Do I do that? Do I pick out stuff and have these false beliefs that are harmful and deconstructive to other people? I mean, they have terrible, I don't want to say self-esteem, because there's not really such a thing as self-esteem, but they have poor pictures of themselves. Well, because there's no baseline for self-esteem. Self-esteem is just whatever you think it is. Because this is what you're talking about. Is it real? How do we know it's real? And if it is, what is the level of self-esteem I'm supposed to have that makes it positive or negative? Right? There's no such thing as self-esteem. But there is such thing as treating yourself negatively or positive, or having confidence, more or less confidence. But there's no numerical, like, once you've reached this level, you now have good self-esteem,
Right, but esteem doesn't talk of is not a term that denotes a number or quantity. Esteem is
Well,
more of
it's being told whether you have high or low.
directional thing.
Yeah, it's whether you have high or low self-esteem, but it has to be in relative perspective to something, and there's not a something. Like I can say, you know, something is near or far to me, but it's near or far compared to something else, right? It's how do I know it's near? It may just, I mean, what would make me say, oh, that's near? You know,
Right.
it has to be in comparison to something else. Like who's rich? Someone who has more money than me.
But
Right.
esteem is a positive or negative thing, though, right? Now, you can say that somebody is positive about something without saying
Yes.
how positive they are, right?
But we tend to speak of self-esteem like there's an actual metric. The way we use words and speak about self-esteem, we treat it like there's an actual metric. Like you have failed to achieve this, therefore you have poor self-esteem. That's not true. You usually have poor other things like poor self-talk. You have false beliefs. You have PTSD stuff going on, things that have happened to you. That's not poor self-esteem. You know, it's like saying a person with a bacterial infection has poor self-esteem. It doesn't help. You need an antibiotic. You don't need a pep talk. You know, so if you're going to go with this poor self-esteem when it doesn't actually exist or there is no real metric, you're not doing anything to help a person. Well, you have poor self-esteem. That doesn't help you. You're a therapist. You're like, this person sees themselves in what I, as a therapist, perceive a negative light, and it's affecting their life. Well, let's find out what those things are. Oh, he's doing negative self-talk. He's calling himself a loser.
Yeah.
You know.
However, so for me, though, the word esteem comes from the word estimation. And
Right.
in estimating themselves, I do believe that people will underestimate themselves or overestimate themselves.
True.
I think often, you know,
True.
that is something exists, right?
We talk about it as if it has a number attached to it. Okay, so how do I?
Some people do, I guess.
Well, because I see it happening on the bigger scale. Like again, coming from my perspective, I've been dealing with all the pandemic stuff. There is a difference between the word efficacy, right? If something has and effective. Those are not the same word. But layman, if you go and read it on the internet, they sound exactly like the same word. They read like the same definition. A layperson,
people use them the same.
They wouldn't know what to do with it. They think that efficacy and effectiveness are the same thing. And so when during the pandemic, they were seeing the efficacy of this vaccine versus the effectiveness of the vaccine. They're like, oh, look, those numbers are different. Well, actually, they don't even do that. They're like, oh, it lost effectiveness. No, that's a normal phenomenon that we're aware of. Condoms have a 98% efficacy when used in a perfectly controlled, ideal scientific environment, getting out the most bang for your buck. When we throw them in the public, their effectiveness is 85% because it's no longer efficacy is when you're inside of a very controlled group scenario. Ideal, right? Effectiveness is how it really operates in reality because you can't always predict every eventuality or every variable that might crop up. So when people hear effectiveness and efficacy, they think they're the same word when they're not. So when people use the word self-esteem, they attach all these thoughts to it like, oh, there's this level that you got to have, and it doesn't actually exist. And so I'm just like, it's very important. And if you conflate it, if you get confused by it, you're going to think things are either way better or way more terrible than they really are when there's not even a measurement at all. It's like, okay, let's focus on the right things. And I have all kinds of examples where people take two words that are similar or sound similar and they run with them. I'm like, oh, here's the big one that is a hot button topic. The COVID-19 vaccine prevents COVID. That's true. The COVID-19 vaccine prevents SARS-CoV-2. That's false. COVID is just symptoms, signs and symptoms. SARS-CoV-2 is infection, doesn't prevent infection. But they hear, oh, it prevents COVID. Absolutely it does. We know it does. We've measured it. We've seen it in a dose response curve. But but they don't know that
Yep.
two words are completely different. And if you decide that
What?
one means the
Yeah.
other, like with self-esteem, you're going to behave like that. And that's going to be
Right.
it's going to change how you act in life. And so my thing is like,
Yeah.
be sure of what you're speaking. Be sure
I
of your
think that's a good thing to go into this day.
you look
Is let's go
everything
in.
okay?
What's that? Yeah, I
You look
gotta go.
okay.
Sorry, time
I
is
was
up
just
for me.
I,
But
I was just queuing in on your behavior, making sure you're okay, man.
yeah,
All
sorry.
right, brother.
Yeah.
Good to see you. Good to
But I
talk to
think
you.
that's you too, and I think that's something to go into today with for our behavior. How does what we've talked about affect our behavior? And that
Well, if we
is
think something is so, we behave as though it is. And
right.
that goes
So
to your earlier point. How do we know things are so?
that's right.
Right.
Let's go into it with a certain amount of humility and
Right.
and
Tentative
curiosity.
language. Tentative language. Like, I think
All
that
right.
this might be like this. All right.
I love that tentative language. Let's come back to
Right.
that idea. All right. Well, thank you, brother.
Yes,
And
always good to see you, man.
you too. Thank you, anybody who's tuned in. I'm gonna have to jet, but
Have fun, man.
appreciate
Be
you,
safe.
and we'll
Come
talk
back
to you
to us.
again soon.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Lee, there you go.